Awesome. All right, welcome everyone to our second career chat. We are excited to have RJ Lasek, right? Am I saying that right?
Lasek.
Lasek,
Yeah,
I'm
close
sorry.
enough.
You might know my Oklahoma accent came out strong on that. So we're excited to have you join us today and just chat with us. And so I'm going to turn it over to you and you tell us about yourself. This is informal. We had our first one last week, so students, and that we have some alumni on as well and some staff members from TU. So everyone just, if you have a question, chat, unmute, and we'll go from there. So RJ, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, thanks, Dean Thompson. Really appreciate the invitation. Hi, everyone. RJ Lasek, alumni. I graduated TU in 2001. Doesn't seem that long ago, but it is. I went to the business school, got my degree in finance. Thought I was going to grow up and be a CFO someday, and that's not the current career track I'm on. I think, one observation I've made is most of you, whatever you're studying and planning to do now, will not be the same in 20 years, and that's okay. So I have worked in a couple of different industries, but I've spent most of my time in biopharma, in the pharmaceutical life sciences. I worked in Tulsa for Williams and some different companies, and then I moved to Chicago in 2003 for two reasons. One was career change, and another was my wife. So, it was a good move. Still married and still working at the same company. So I work for Takeda. It's a large global biopharmaceutical company that now is actually headquartered in Boston, but I still live in the Chicago area. And I've done a lot of different things at that company. I actually started in finance, but I moved into different roles. Analytics, marketing. I worked overseas for 3 years, living in Portugal, which was an awesome opportunity to be abroad and do something different. And then I came back, and I've been working in various roles in the company and operations. And I head up a group right now that we call commercial operations, which is a lot of different areas of the business all combined: analytics and data science and operations and things. Takeda is, we have about 18,000 employees in the United States. We're really proud of our company. I know, just speaking frankly, the pharmaceutical industry doesn't have the greatest reputation, and some of that is deserved because I think historically we have not made some smart moves. But it's an area where we feel, we're bringing transformative medicines to patients, and we have to focus on how we can do that in the best way to make sure patients have affordable access, that we are ensuring that people can afford those medications, and that we're acting with a high level of ethics and integrity in the way we communicate our data and our science, because we're dealing with people's lives and we're doing something really important. So I've enjoyed working here. The company is actually actively involved in the fight against COVID-19 through a plasma alliance, where we're taking donations of blood plasma from patients that have recovered from COVID and transforming it into a therapy that will actually likely be approved later this year. I just share that because I think, you never know, depending on the industry you're in, how you can impact people's lives, either directly or indirectly. And I think it's important that no matter what you do in your career, you're kind of connected to a mission and you feel that. So, that's a little bit about me. And, I know Dean Thompson and I would talk a little bit about sharing some ideas or thoughts for skills that younger people are going to need in the workplace moving forward. And I'm happy to do that, or if you want to start with some Q&A or anything specific. Okay. So maybe what I can do is I kind of outlined maybe 5 different skills that I think are going to be really important for you now and in the future. And none of them are, technical. It's not accounting or marketing or anything like that. And so maybe what I can do is take each of these, and I'll talk about it a little bit, and then maybe I'll stop and ask for questions or comments. But I'll tell you the 5 I'm going to cover first. The first one is what I refer to as self-awareness and emotional intelligence. So I'll talk a little bit about that. The second is communication skills, and I know this could be met with some eye rolls, but I have a little bit of a kind of a different take on it than maybe you're used to. And the third is what I refer to as learning agility. Having an adaptable approach to learning. The fourth is critical thinking and problem solving. Also may get some eye rolls, but sometimes it's as simple as it sounds. It's really, really important. And then the last one is actually what I refer to as citizenship. And that includes elements of things like how we're working in a global world, as well as the importance of diversity and inclusion, which if there's never been an obvious more important time for that now, I think we're seeing that play out in the US in our workspace. So maybe I'll just start with the first one on self-awareness and emotional intelligence. Actually, this is really hard. And it's something I actually struggled with a lot in the first few years of my career. And the way I explain it is self-awareness is just knowing enough about yourself, your strengths and your weaknesses, and being able to make adjustments. We're all different, and we all have things that we bring to the table, and we all have blind spots sometimes. And if you don't know what your blind spots are and try to address them, they can derail your career a little bit. I don't care how smart someone is or how good they are. If they lack some of these awareness skills, they can be really actually, unproductive and anti-productive to the workspace. And this just comes with practice, guys. I mean, learning about yourself and what you're good at and what you're not. And I also subscribe to the theory that you need to develop and build your strengths as opposed to trying to be good at everything. There's things that I'm not good at and I'm never going to be good at, but I need to know that, and I need to be able to manage that. And then this idea of emotional intelligence, how you interact with others and how you respond to them, how you connect with them is really, really important. And it's about making bonds with people that are different from you. This also comes with a lot of practice. Can you listen to people? Can you understand where they're coming from? There's different personalities and social styles. This is not something you're going to get, you're going to be working on this your entire career. And I think as you go into it, what I think about these 5 skills is, as you start into the workplace or you're earlier in your career, the sooner you can kind of start to grasp these and work on them, the better you're going to be positioned for success in the long run, and just give yourself more options. So, if you go into an interview, you need to be thinking about this, because you're going to get questions about, what are you not good at? How do you interact with others? Tell me about a time you couldn't connect with someone that was different than you and how you solved that. And the answer can't be, I've never had that problem. I've literally interviewed young people that have said that. And it just shows in and of itself kind of a lack of awareness. Despite the way maybe some of our people in the public eye behave, self-confidence is good, but arrogance is not. and we look for that when we hire people. So, a couple thoughts here is, if you get a chance now or in your career, take a self-assessment, right? A Myers-Briggs. There's something called the DISC profile. And there's some good books on this subject. Emotional Intelligence 2.0 is one of my favorites. And then there's some classics like Situational Self-Leadership. So these are, and I'm happy to send a list of books and things to Dean Thompson after if she wants to share. But, this is something you just have to study and practice. You're not going to get it perfect, but just having an awareness of it is important. And when you're interviewing for it, know that you're going to get questions on these topics. If you don't, you don't have a very good interviewer. So that's kind of the first of the 5 I thought I would share, and happy to take any questions or comments on that one before we move on.
So hopefully everyone can unmute themselves. If not, that means I did something wrong. So go ahead and just raise your hand if you have a question, or try to unmute yourself. Let's see.
Yeah, I have kind of a silly question.
Sorry.
I really enjoy hearing about books that we can read from people like yourself. And I got the first one, Emotional Intelligence 2.0. Can you repeat what the second book was you mentioned?
Yeah, sure. It's called Situational Self-Leadership by Ken Blanchard. I think sometimes it's called the 1-Minute Manager. And really the whole premise is the framework about as you manage or interact with different people, you have to change your approach depending on the type of person, right? That becomes an important skill.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Logan.
Do you have any other questions? All righty.
It's okay. People are shy. And, you know, as I go through this too, guys, feel free to make this conversational when I stop. You know, you don't have to ask a question just about the topic, or, you know, even if you want to disagree, you know, or you have a different thought, throw it out there. So the second one I mentioned was communication skills. So, you know, I know in some ways this goes without saying, and many of you in your, you know, education and earlier in your career work on this stuff. You know, how do I write a good memo or an email and create an effective presentation? Those are all important, right? I think you know, especially now with technology and how quick everything is, we sometimes diminish the importance of really good communication. And you don't need to be able to write a novel. A couple things I'd point to for you to think about, and like all of these skills, it just takes practice. How do you break complex information or problems down into simple messages? Often in your career, you're going to be faced with, you know, you've spent weeks analyzing data and a problem, or, you know, a financial model, and now you have to present it to somebody like me who is, you know, floating, you know, make fun of myself a little bit, floating up here in the clouds and doesn't really know what the hell's going on, and honestly is not as smart as you on the subject. So, you know, but a lot of the way you come across as an effective member of an organization, you know, regardless of the size, is your ability to communicate and to distill complex information in parts and pieces into simple concepts and messages. And part of this is you know, knowing your audience too, right? I mean, if you're presenting a detailed marketing plan or a financial valuation, you know, it depends on who you're talking to. Is this an executive? Is this a peer? Is this someone that understands the concept or not? That's an important skill. And, you know, the other thing I'd encourage you to think about is creative public speaking. Speaking in front of a group is not easy, and it's not as simple as it seems. And I know you practice it in university and everything, and that's great. You know, but what you're going to find out is often that public speaking or giving a presentation is like standing up in front of a room uninterrupted for 20 minutes is absolutely not reality. Like, you know, unless you're giving some formal lecture, you're going to be interrupted. You're going to have people try to derail the meeting. You're going to have all kinds of distractions. And so I think, you know, actually one of the most amazing courses I ever had was, so if you ever get a chance to do this in your career, it's communication using improv skills. And here in Chicago, we have you may have heard of a group called Second City, which is a famous comedian group where a lot of the Saturday Night Live famous people like Chris Farley and Bill Murray all came out of. And they actually do corporate training for people on how to do good presentations. And it's very uncomfortable at first, but it's kind of this whole idea of you've got to be quick on your feet. So, you know, I kind of separate communication into, you know, written and then the verbal. But like having effective presentations, it's not just about simple messages and simple slide content. And that's the other thing, guys, please stop with, you know, we have people spend so much time on creating these masterful works of art in PowerPoint that end up with like 6,000 words and graphics. And I mean, it's just overkill. You don't have to do that. I think you have to figure out how do you creatively present and discuss stuff and how you think on your feet. And then the other part of effectively presenting is actually listening. I think we forget that. People go in and, you know, I've got my plan and I've got my messages. But if you've got a real important discussion or presentation, have you role played or thought about kind of challenges you're going to get or pushback or Q&A, and how do you do that? So something else here, a couple good books here. There's one called Talk Like TED. You know, you guys are familiar with the TED Talks platform. I think that Carmine Gallo wrote that, as well as another book that I like called 5 Stars, The Communication Secrets to Get from Good to Great. Both of those are really fantastic. So again, something to study and think about in your careers and practice, like while you're in college and when you first get out. Knowing the information is one thing, being able to communicate it is actually very different. So I'll stop there. Any comments or thoughts people want to share?
I just want to say thank you for the comments on the PowerPoints.
I'm terrible. I'm very guilty of this.
Because it is, you want to put all the words and then you're reading. So thank you. That is much needed and we need to hear that. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, and sometimes there's a need for it, right? I mean, but it's, what can you get away with? It's kind of like what's the least amount of information? What do I call it? The least effective dose of information in PowerPoint. I actually, maybe I can ask you guys a question, right? Like, I'd love to hear, is this something you feel you get a chance to work on in your classes or your programs, or is it something you think you need more of in education? And do you feel like if you're working now, are you getting these kinds of opportunities?
Feel free to unmute, or if you cannot unmute, raise your hand.
Okay. Hi, RJ.
Hi.
I work at the University of Tulsa, and I definitely think there are opportunities. Everything you're talking about so far is so relevant, and I think when your point about the PowerPoints, when you create them, I also think don't read them word for word, and I think that goes along with your presentation skills.
Mm-hmm.
That's my one. I had two regrets about my time at TU. One is that I didn't take a public speaking class because I really do feel like it would have been important. And you're right, I could take some opportunities. We do have TEDx U Tulsa, and there's some improv groups in Tulsa where you can do some storytelling skills,
mm-hmm.
and I should take advantage of those sometimes. So I think those are really good points. And my other regret is not studying abroad. So that's
well, I have more regrets than I feel like as good of a school as TU is, there's probably a lot of things I didn't get to experience. The other thing, guys, is Amy made a really, really good point. That's very common, right? For us to, telling a story on paper versus live is different. So people read and digest information like 5 times faster than they actually hear it. So, you put up a slide and people will read it in 30 seconds. So as you're talking, you don't repeat verbatim and kind of what's the key takeaway, what's some color you want to add. That's important. And you'll get these kind of questions in interviews too. So
RJ, as we, are virtual and are learning and everything, and as students, what's one way to, I don't want to say improve upon it, but some techniques or in that communication space of, so we're, I don't know if it wasn't called Harvey when we were at TU. It was, I don't think it existed, but Harvey is where now it was WebCT, where all the courses and all the grades and stuff.
Oh yeah, we didn't have that.
Yeah. And so, but now students, they learn through Harvey, through Collaborate, which is kind of like Zoom, but to communicate and, you're maybe not seeing the professor one-on-one, and office hours may be over the phone. How do they get their point across in that way, or even presenting virtually?
Yeah, no, it's I mean, it's very timely. I mean, even at the executive level of my company, we talk about these things. So a couple thoughts. One of the learnings I've had is that in this virtual environment, it takes more time to present, communicate, and discuss than it normally would, or than it would in a live setting. So I think you have to, when you're planning for these kind of interactions, you have to take that into account. The second thing is the concepts I talked about earlier about simplifying become even more important, and not having super busy slides, because often what's happening in the business world now is I'm on Zoom, and then part of the screen I've got a big slide deck, right? And my eyes are darting around. and people are, over here, on their phone, it's harder. So I think taking your time, stopping to ask questions in this virtual environment is really important. The other thing I'd note, one thing that's changed is people are a lot more direct on video than they are in person. That can be good and bad. I think what happens is now sometimes and I read this, actually, there was a McKinsey study on this, where people, like, when you're interacting with your manager, man, manager must be in a bad mood. He just seems really or he or she seems really to the point and tough. And I think part of that is just because we're all trying to deal with this technology and maybe save time. People are getting burnt out a little bit too, being on the camera all day. So we're actually trying to give people permission not to have it on. So, but yeah, I think we're going to learn. I think a lot of the communication skills and training in the future is going to be more about how we do this effectively, in a virtual setting.
Thank you. All right, I see no hands raised and no unmuting, so we'll keep going.
Okay. So my next one is, learning agility or adaptability. And, for me, the key here is things are changing really fast, and industries look completely different, after 10 years. And for you really to be successful, you've got to be able to adapt to change a lot more than, I had to when I first came into the workplace, and certainly, people that are older than me. Companies are always changing. So I've been at Takeda 17 years, but it feels like, the company's changed drastically at least 6 times. I've been in, 13 or 14 different jobs in 17 years. And so and I've seen the industry change radically. The therapeutic areas, or kind of the diseases we were treating 10 years ago, are now completely different what we're doing now. So those are, and every business you're in is going to have examples of that. Things move really quick, and that's accelerating, and it can be really hard to keep up. So what we often look for in when we hire individuals, whether they're, new hires, young people, or more experienced people, is, can they exhibit this ability to be dropped into a new situation, learn quickly, adapt, and be effective, right? Because things are changing so much. And have you had experiences outside of your comfort zone? What did you learn from them? And were you able to be successful? This is really important for any of you that, have leadership aspirations. If you're, you want to be the president and CEO someday, or run the marketing organization, or be a CFO, these skills become even more important, and having this kind of ability to work across a broad organization with many different complexities. So, in some ways, I think I read a term, someone called this cognitive flexibility, which, there's probably a psychologist that wrote this, and there's probably a lot of science behind it. But, to me, that just kind of comes down to, can you think about things differently? Can you take a different perspective? One of the big problems we have in business right now is bias in decision making. There's some really good research, out of Harvard on this, and Oxford, about how no matter how much you try, it's groupthink and bias in decision making is so common. And we struggle with this as a company too. Even though we've got data and information telling us we're wrong, we don't like being wrong, or we don't like being challenged. And so this is something we're all really kind of dealing with and learning, is how do we get people to have this kind of, cognitive approach where they're willing to let outside information in and think differently about a problem. Again, like everything, this takes practice. So some advice I'd have for you earlier in your career is, a lot of this is experiential. You're not, you can read a book on this, but you got to practice it. So you're getting some of this at TU right now, and I will tell you, this is something that's going to be easier for you than it was for me, and a lot easier for you than, people that have been in the workplace a lot longer. You really want to expose yourself to new experiences. If you're in accounting, there's a reason why when you're an accounting major, you still have to take classes religion and all these other things. Actually, I tell people in my time at TU, my favorite classes weren't even in the business school, and I think some of the best learning I got was outside of the business school. Somehow I might be the only person in history that has I ended up getting a major in finance, and I think I ended up with a minor in Native American art history. It's I don't know if I thought I was going to be the curator of Gilcrease or what, but I just share that because I had this educational interest completely outside of the norm, and I think what it did is it made me this lifelong learner of different subjects and industries. And that's the other point I'd make. When you get into the workforce, think outside of your own business. We have another problem. I'm in consumer goods, and everything we do is we get input from what other consumer goods companies are doing, or life sciences, or engineering, and that's just not the right way to think. So put yourself in situations where you can mix with diverse groups of people and get new experiences. And this is actually career advice. So when you go into work in a company or a business, let's say you start in finance, and even if you want to be the CFO, go do a role in marketing, go do a role in sales, go do a role in communications. Those things are going to teach you so much and make you a broader, better business person, honestly. And they're going to catapult you. Because if I'm looking at, if I were interviewing two people for a role, let's say a head of a marketing role, and they've done nothing but marketing, and then I've got another person who's done a lot of marketing but also worked in operations or finance or sales, I'm going to take that second person, most likely. Never can tell, but I want to see that broad movement. I want to see people that have this adaptability and learning agility. So the good news is, you're doing a lot of this right now. You're in class with a diverse set of people. You get exposed to new ideas. But when you get into your career, make sure you're not just in your finance box or your marketing box year after year after year. And it doesn't need to be a formal job. You could get involved in projects. You can be a financial analyst and helping the company think about how we recruit people, or how we drive some diversity and inclusion initiatives. You could work on, a marketing project. Those are the kind of things that I think will enrich your early career experience and set you up better, when you get later into your career. I don't have any good books on that one. Sorry.
Hey, I don't know if you can hear me.
Yeah. Hi.
Hey, I'm just trying to turn on my camera so you guys can see me. You kind of answered my question already, because I was going to ask about transitioning to different roles in the companies.
Mm-hmm.
And you mentioned you were in I think you said 14 different roles.
Yeah.
Of your current job. I'm just curious, how did you start, did you build a framework to be able to move to those different roles and kind of figure out okay, this is what I need to learn and what I need to do? Or how did you go about doing that? I feel like after 3 or 4 roles, you kind of got in a groove of this is what I need to do anytime I move.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So I can share a little bit about my experience. And I'd say, some of those roles were just kind of promotions within the same area or same discipline. And please, don't anyone think you have to be in 14 different jobs. I think that's an example of people can move around a lot. So 3 things I think drive that. One is, what do I want? And what I want changed through my career. I started off wanting to be an investment banker and a CFO, and that changed. I never saw myself in the job I'm in today. And so, part of it is what do you want to do and what are your goals? And what I tried to do was set goals that weren't really specific about a discipline or a role, but more about the kind of work I wanted to be doing. Leading large groups of people, being in general management, working on projects and initiatives that helped develop our people and make them better, training, things like that. Getting involved in community initiatives that the company was sponsoring. So I think if you kind of set these goals for yourself, and don't look too far out, guys, right? 5 years is more than enough. A lot happens So that's part one of it. I think, like, think more about the kind of work you want to be doing and the types of experiences you want, as opposed to the very specific role. And different people have different motivators, and none of them are wrong, right? So there's some people that just want to be, an excellent, computer programmer and stick with that. There's people that aren't interested in leading people right now, and that's totally fine. If we have a company full of everyone wants to be the CEO, it's not going to work out very well. So again, you get diversity of people. Like, what's important to you? Is it work-life balance? And that's going to change. Like, as you go through your life, and some of you may have children, some of you may have a family, and that the things that are important kind of change. So the second thing is, I wish I could say I had this great plan and framework, but a lot of it is you want to join an organization where developing people is important, because that becomes part of the DNA of the company. So what you'll find in a lot of companies is they'll take people and say, okay, you're a top performer, or you're someone we want to grow and develop, and they almost push you into experiences. So I really benefited from having some good mentors. So make sure as you get into your career that you're talking to people that you don't work with on a regular basis, so that you can get yourself exposed to that, but get career advice. And actually, I've had at least 3 jobs where I actually kind of drug my feet into those roles, but I was coached by people that were looking out for me and said, look, I'll give you an example. I started in finance and analytics, and then I went out and I was a salesperson for 2 years. And I mean, that was like, I am not going to go be a salesperson. That's forget it. And, I had someone kind of talk me through this. Well, think of what you're going to learn and the different skills. And if I hadn't have had somebody kind of pushing and coaching me, I wouldn't have done that. And I think that's probably one of the jobs that I learned absolutely the most, because all the skills I'd built thus far early in my career were completely useless. So, imagine you spend all your time doing spreadsheets and models and meetings, and then now you're out in a doctor's office trying to educate them on a diabetes therapy. I mean, it's just like radically different, but it forces you to adapt and learn new skills. And then the third thing I'd say is, in terms of the framework or the other way to think about it. So the first thing I talked about was, what's important to you, not the roles, but the kind of work you want to be doing. The second is, just understanding that, you need good mentors and people to coach and guide you, because your career desires are going to change over time. And then the third thing I tell you guys is, when you get into the business world and you start, working in all these different areas, don't be afraid to do something very different, especially early in your career. Because you're going to learn so much from that, and you don't have to worry as much about the money and the financial security, quite frankly. So I hope that's helpful for your question. I wish I could say there was this great plan and everything fell into place, or I had this advanced way to think about it. I didn't. But that'd be my advice there.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
So, another one I touched on of my 5 topics, the fourth one was critical thinking, problem solving skills. So, this is definitely an interview question you're going to get, right? How did you approach a problem, break it down, make a decision? How did you weigh evidence? How did you make a decision with incomplete information? I'm sure you guys have done this, right? You do business case problems, you do scenarios, you do group projects. And, if they're good, they don't have all the information you need, because no one ever has all the information you need. And you have to weigh different kind of facts and evidence, and you have to make some inferences and some educated guesses, and you ultimately have to make a decision. Part of this is it is a skill set in terms of how you craft. There are mental models for this. Like, engineers are actually really good at this. And so sometimes we'll have engineers. I love actually hiring somebody who's an engineer, got their MBA, because I mean, the way they approach things is very interesting. They have a very, there's different mental models you can use here. But it's really like, how do you break a problem down into its parts? How do you observe and collect information and make sure it's good? How do you analyze and interpret that? How do you evaluate it? How do you make a decision? People are going to look for that. And again, it's experiential. So that's part of what you're starting to get in your education right now, is how you deal in those situations. There was a good book on this I was thinking about. It's a long title. I think I've got it on my notes here. So Critical Thinking, Your Guide to Effective Argument, Analysis, and Study by Tom Chatfield. And again, I can send a list of these. I will tell you guys the other thing is being in school, it might seem like, oh, I can't wait to not be, reading and studying all the time, but lifelong learning is a real deal. And we're always, my advice is, as much time as you can spend reading on, subjects of interest or things that are outside of your day-to-day, it's time well spent. So I know it sounds basic, right? But when I'm hiring people, that's what, tell me about a problem you had and how you solved it. Very common question that a lot of times people struggle with. And a lot of times, people, tell me about a problem and tell me a failure you had, right? I think sometimes the greatest learning comes from, you go through this process of critical thinking, you make what you feel like is a good decision, and it was actually a terrible decision. That's one of the things that comes through growth and learning, is how you're given permission to fail. Not too much, right? We don't want you to take the company down, but how do you fail and learn something from it, and then how you adapt to it after, right? That's important to employers as well. Thoughts on that? Questions?
I don't know if we still do it, but in the business school, there was a professor that awarded, he would give an award for the biggest fail of his class for the semester, because he did say everyone learns from their failure, and from that failure might come the greatest idea, and that we shouldn't look at failure as the end all. Like that is
right.
Some people are so devastated by that and don't take away that there were a lot of learning opportunities from it.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to find out if we still do that. So,
that sounds good. A lot of companies do that.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
Oh, sorry for interrupting. Yeah, so as right now you're in a pharmaceutical company, and you previously just mentioned that you've worked through like a lot of jobs throughout your years. So I'm wondering, like, because when you get out of college, like, you're not gonna expect to land on a job that was your ideal choice, right? You're gonna land on some experimental jobs just to get you through and to have some experience, or maybe pick up a new skill set. So I'm wondering, like, what was a previous job that you've done and you learned a new skill set that you still apply to your pharmaceutical company right now?
Yeah, no, great question. So, because I started my career with this whole, finance, valuation, kind of corporate FP and financial planning experience. Well, I think one of the things I picked up that is still very relevant today was honestly the first time I managed people. So it's maybe a little bit of a twist on the answer to your question, but many of you will end up managing people in your career, and it could be 2 people, 1 person, it could be 1,000. And I have no doubt, given the caliber of students that TU has, many of you will be executives. Maybe you'll run a nonprofit. Maybe you'll be a community leader. There's a lot of things you guys could do. I think kind of coaching, leading, and motivating people is. So it's interesting. The first time I did it, it was an absolute disaster. Actually, I had some people that worked for me quit because I was such a bad manager. And I share that not because it doesn't embarrass me, because I learned from it. And so I think that's the one thing. When I first started managing people, and I learned how it's completely different when you're formally managing people and you're responsible for coaching and motivating them to be successful, because it's not about me anymore. It's about, the military actually has, surprisingly enough, they have this concept called servant leadership. And really it's this idea that you are not important anymore, your people are. And if you are helping them be successful and coach them, then ultimately it's good for you. But that was kind of a tough nails lesson I had early in my career. I started managing people in my, I don't know, I was probably about 27, and people that were older than me, and it was kind of a really tough life lesson there. But the company gave some support and how to be a good manager, and all that stuff has stuck with me, and I still try to work on it today. So that's one story I would share.
Thank you.
And, the other thing, you brought up a good point. Maybe you don't get the ideal role out of college, right? And that's fine. Some of you, and I don't know. I mean, I was lucky when I graduated. It was, the economy was booming. We had like 5 job offers. I mean, it was, it was an easier time, I think. You guys are entering a workforce in a world that's changing. We've got some struggles right now, clearly. But I believe most of you are younger or earlier in your career. I would say if you end up in a role that you get into it, you're learning, you're growing. If it's a bad fit, or the culture's bad in the company, or you don't like what you're doing, please do something else. Especially if you're younger. I honestly wish I would have taken that advice at different points in my career. As much as I love Takeda, I do have regrets. I mean, there's other things I wish I would have done. I've been fortunate because I feel like the company I've worked at, the culture and the people I've always enjoyed. That's not going to be true. A lot of you are going to end up in toxic situations. And you may have, fit issues or cultural issues. And that means a great deal. So don't be afraid to change and do something different, especially earlier in your career. Because if you're not growing, like, emotionally, and if you're not growing career-wise, or you think you've got significant limitations, and the other thing that happens, guys, you get into a company and things don't work out. Don't force it to work. It's kind of like a relationship in some ways. It's okay to break up. We see that all the time. And if you're not adding
the
value,
best advice.
yeah, and if you're not adding value, a company's not going to, it's really, at the end of the day, it's what's best for you, and only you can make that decision. I always tell people, like, oh, help me with my development. Everyone owns their own growth and development. You want to be in a company where you're allowed to do that, but don't be afraid to make a change either. Especially earlier in your career, because it's not gonna, you will be in bad situations in your career that aren't good for you and not healthy. Time to move on. So the last one I had, and I know we've got 15 minutes, so I want to be respectful of time. The last one I talked about was citizenship. This is definitely a lot easier for you all than me, or certainly older people, because the world's changed a lot, and you're already in this environment. You've got to be, it used to be, you worked in a region or a country or an area, and you didn't necessarily interact with a lot of people that were different than you, and now that's not the case. You're most likely going to be in a global business where you're interacting with people from different cultures, and so language is one thing, but kind of just basically understanding how you need to be able to communicate and bond with people that have different backgrounds. When I worked in Europe, that was probably the greatest learning for me, is I worked with people from all over the world, and you had this kind of Oklahoma boy now having to bond and work with a woman from China and a guy from Brazil, and all these things. So that makes you really valuable in an industry, though, because I think you are exposed a lot more to that than I was, and I think other people are. So when you're going to join a company, and there's a lot of talk now, people talk about diversity and inclusion. Some of the companies mean it, others don't. It can mean a lot of different things. I think for me, what it kind of comes down to is there's a lot of actually science behind this. There's a lot of research that says diversity brings a lot of advantages to an organization. They make better decisions. They're more creative. They're better at retaining talent, and they're actually a lot more profitable. There was one study that if I think Boston Consulting Group did it. If you have a company with a diverse management group, then actually they're 20% more profitable than those that aren't. And I don't know exactly how they defined it. And as you get into the world, what I think you'll see is maybe a lot of young people feel like that, but you're going to run into people that don't feel it's important. I will tell you, anybody that's running a business today, 90-something% of them, they know it's important. And so this is a skill they're going to look for. But there's a lot of change going on in the business world. Like, how do we, I'll give you an example. So a few months ago, I had recommended that for all of our people managers, we actually do this training. It's called unconscious bias training. And it's like teaching people, and I've been through it and it was kind of painful, like teaching people how we all have biases. And we all have some prejudice and things that, a lot of it's unconscious, and it impacts the way we make decisions and the way we interact with people. And there was some resistance to this. Well, that changed pretty quickly. And I don't say that to toot my horn. I just think, it's going to be an environment where you guys just need to, I think if you start just by recognizing that having a team with people from very different backgrounds, cultures, it just strengthens the group. I mean, it's like you're taking, think of it as like an experiment where you're taking the best parts of all these different cultures and experiences and putting them into one team. They're going to make better decisions. And because the business or the nonprofit you work at or whatever you do is going to be needing to operate in a diverse world. And so as young people, I think what your generation is going to have as you start in the workplace is you're starting off with this being important, and you're starting off with people trying to figure this out. Whereas that wasn't the case when I started. And certainly wasn't the case when, the people older than I started. So I think it's been a learning journey. But we're going to look for that. We're going to hire people and say, how can this person make us more diverse? And guys, diversity is not just about, culture, skin color, sexual orientation. It's, can you also bring divergent thinking? It's okay to be, I can raise my hand and say, hey, I'm a white male, heterosexual, but here's some things I can do or maybe bring that are different. So it's really just about strengthening that pot overall. And I think, Amy and Dean Thompson, I don't know. I mean, to me, the kind of pulpit I've been on lately, I talk to some other schools too, because I'd love to see this part of the curriculum too, is how we get young people starting to think about this. So that's my last one of the 5, maybe more ambiguous, but I think it's just a theme you guys should be conscious of. So I know we have some time for questions.
So I was just going to say, love making it a part of curriculum. Definitely, especially, going forward. And I graduated in 2004 from TU, and, to see that transition. So I went to work for an oil company, which, that was hard to, diversity, making that a part of, what it should be. It just, it was a different world then. And I don't seem like that was that long ago. It doesn't to me, but, it was. I've been out of school a while.
Yeah.
So that's great advice. Great advice. So if anyone has any questions or any comments, now's the time to jump in.
Well, no. Go, Marco. You go.
Thank you. So prior, you mentioned that your company had experience, or your company was guilty of having some sort of a lot of bias when it comes to, what was it again? When it comes, because it's a pharmaceutical company, I don't understand. Like, can you expand upon what do you mean by the bias that occurs in your workplace or your workforce?
Oh, sure. It actually might, let me clarify my comment. What I was talking about is bias in decision-making, not like cultural or ethnic bias. Bias like, I know the answer. So think about it this way. Like, we often talk about, there's actually a lot of research on this, that if I think that the numbers are going to tell me that this is a good decision, I'm much more likely to not listen to when the numbers say it's actually a bad decision because it challenges my inherent bias or understanding of the problem. Like, separate from any kind of cultural, diversity issues, more around like, if I think I know something or I've been an expert in this field, I'm often, it's often easy for people just to go with what's comfortable and move ahead. So that's more what I was referencing. Good clarifying point though.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah. Another way to think about it is like, maybe not in like bias, and actually maybe we need to be thinking about talking about this differently. This is a good example. It's like groupthink or, looking for easy answers. So a good example is like everybody's trying to do more with data science and artificial intelligence and all of this. And I think what ends up happening is people invest all this time in analyses, but then, you start with the way you should do it is you start with a business question, and then you do the analytics to help you inform the answer. Often what happens is people say, here's the business question. I already think I know the answer, so let's do some analytics to tell me I'm right. It's not very helpful.
Totally putting that in my email signature, RJ. Just
It's human nature. It's human nature. I've done it.
Amy, did you have something?
Well, I was going to say, there is some great programming, and a lot of that I think comes out of the Business Career Center and comes out. Yeah, I know you're Lionel's. If I don't know if all the students on or even alumni that are on here know that you're an advisor for the Association of Black Collegians, and that is the programming that comes out of the Business Career Center, out of the Association of Black Collegians, has been some of my favorite programming that I have gotten to, participate in the last few years. And I would encourage everyone to just take advantage of that, because I do think, and even the Multicultural Center, Resource Center on campus, some amazing programming. And I think it gives you a different viewpoints and just understanding of different people. You're talking about working internationally, and I have talked to people who have said even like the things that you may not understand about people, about the way you hand a business card to someone is different in in China versus the way you'd hand to someone in the United States. And a lot of that is a respect issue, but understanding some of other people and their how they feel about, because here in the United States we're more likely to throw the business card across the table at lunch rather than hand it to someone. We wouldn't where you might present it to someone without like covering the logo, which it seems disrespectful of your company. And so there are a lot of like things you don't think about, but things that are kind of interesting and telling of being willing to understand other people from here and other countries.
Yeah, good point.
Anyone else? So on that final point, we work a lot with the National Association of Colleges and Employers, which I'm a member of, came up with these 8 career competencies. And one of the 8 is the global intercultural fluency that students are going to need to demonstrate to employers. And much like you said, RJ, it's, if we think about the workforce as it is now, there's still a lot of people in the workforce who that wasn't a priority. Not by anyone's fault, but that's just so
the business world's changed.
Yeah, the world has changed and changed very quickly. But just having that and knowing that, and I do, and like I say, 2-time alum from TU, RJ, Amy, Borazon, Shanae, alumni, TU, we're doing it. We're getting our students there, and so which is great to be a part of a university that is doing that. So. With that, are there any other comments or questions? RJ, we thank you for your time. I'm just going to look see if the chat's going.
Yeah, thank you, RJ.
Yeah, I just want
no,
to say thank you.
yeah. It's the highlight of my day, actually.
Yeah, right there. Okay.
So I appreciate it. I hope it was helpful, guys. And, best of luck to you this summer and next year. And, the last thing I'd share is I think, you're getting a good education. You've got a good foundation. And just know when you get out in the career world, it's okay if things change and seem challenging at times, right? I mean, life is like that, and I'm sure all of you will be successful. Just kind of stay true to yourself. Like, what are your principles? What do you want to do? What motivates and excites you? Because that's going to be important. Don't find yourself caught in a situation where you're miserable, and don't let that go too long. So that's my last thought. I appreciate it, Dean Thompson. Thanks for inviting me.
Thank you so much. And one day I hope we get to meet in person.
Yeah, maybe next year. Let's see.
Yeah, let's hope. Fingers crossed. Right. Thank you all for joining us today, and we'll see you next time. All right. Thank you, RJ. Again. Bye.
Bye-bye.
All right, thank you.